All right, I want to bring a message to you today. It's called Unscathed. It's part of our series called Greater. In this series, one of the things that we're doing is we're looking at ancient kings of Israel. We're going through one of the things that we believe that all the scriptures in the Bible were there for a reason. And so we want to look at the scriptures and go through the Bible and find some lessons from scriptures, even that maybe seem obscure. And so, you know, as we look at these scriptures, we're going to be looking at the book of 2 Chronicles in the Bible. So it's a book of 2 Chronicles. It's in the Old Testament. If you want to follow along, pull out your device, or there's some Bibles in some of the chairs in front of you. Or some of the chairs have a Bible in there you may be able to use. But we're going to look at the book of 2 Chronicles. It's in the Old Testament, about midway through the Old Testament. There's a 1 Chronicles and there's a 2 Chronicles. We're looking at chapter 18. Today's message is called Unscathed. And if you want to take some notes, there's a sermon notes page in your bulletin that you can use to jot down some thoughts you want to remember from this message. And I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. We're looking for this message, a king of Judah whose name was Jehoshaphat. And Jehoshaphat was known as one of the better or one of the best kings of Israel because he followed God. He continued making reforms in the country to draw the people back to God, changed laws, changed the ways of the country, and called his countrymen back to Jesus, back to God. And so as it turned out, we'll see that he had a relationship by marriage that you could say he came to regret. And we'll start in chapter 18. I'm going to go ahead and read from verses 1 through 4. Now Jehoshaphat had great riches and honor, and he made a marriage alliance with Ahab. And after some years, he went down to Ahab in Samaria. Ahab was the king of Israel. The nation of Israel had been divided into two kingdoms, the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah. And at different times, depending on who was the king and depending on how things went, sometimes they had an alliance with each other and sometimes they were at war with each other. This was a time where they had an alliance. And Ahab killed an abundance of sheep and oxen for Jehoshaphat and for the people who were with him. So he had this big feast as he invited Jehoshaphat into his kingdom and induced him, I like that word, induced him to go up against Ramoth Gilead, induced him to go to war with the king of Syria. Ahab, verse 3, king of Israel, said to Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, "Will you go with me to Ramoth Gilead?" And he answered, "I am as you are. My people are your people. We will be with you in war." And Jehoshaphat and the king of Israel, and Jehoshaphat said to the king of Israel, "Inquire first for a word from the Lord," or for the word of the Lord. And so let's check this out. In preparation, he secured this alliance with Jehoshaphat. So Ahab secured an alliance with Jehoshaphat of Judah, and it was an alliance based on a marriage. Now, let me say this about marriage, that when you marry, it often comes with baggage you don't expect. And can I just, for a few minutes, just say a few things to consider about marriage. And first of all, I'm a huge fan of good marriages. I am a huge fan of good marriages. But I'm not a fan of unhealthy marriages. And so I would say this, before you marry, can I ask you to say something with me? Say this with me. Before marriage, eyes wide open. What I mean by that is before you say "I do," look for flaws in the person that you're going with, in this prospective candidate, and look at it like a candidate. Look at the season that you're dating as a season of of interviewing a person and making sure it's the right person. And so eyes wide open. You're looking for every flaw. You don't want to miss anything before you say I do. Your eyes are wide open, and so you're looking like, okay, can I see myself making decisions for the rest of my life with this person? Can I see myself being satisfied with this person as my spouse for years and years to come? And I would say this, don't buy into the trap, which so many people fall into this trap. And the trap is that, oh, I'll change him or her after we get married. Oh, she'll change. Oh, he'll change after we're married. That's the biggest bogus lie ever. Seriously. Don't buy into that. Don't think of that way. Don't think of marriage that way. You've got to have your eyes wide open beforehand. And so your eyes are wide open and you're looking for every flaw and you're thinking, are we going to be happy together? Are we going to be always fighting over stuff? Are we so far apart? And I would say this, that there's a chance that they can change. People can always change if they make that choice. But if you're the kind of person that you made this choice where you go like, okay, maybe they'll change afterwards, you're going to be so unhappy with that person and always trying to change them and nitpick them to death. You're going to be one of these people who nitpick every flaw and just take all the joy out of it. You don't want your marriage to be like that. If your marriage is like that, you need to go through some counseling and change a few things, because it doesn't have to be like that. Now, you can change afterwards, but it's a lot harder to change afterwards. It's a lot better to choose the right person on the front end. And then I would also say this, I would add this, be the right person on the front end. Be the right person. Focus on being the right person. As far as the changes, make the changes in you. Be the right person. Be the best spouse to be married to, and prepare yourself in that way. And if you gave more thought to the kind of car that you picked out than to the person who you want to marry, something's wrong. Something's wrong. You should be thinking about the kind of person, you who are not married, you should be thinking about the kind of person you want to marry, and you ought to have a list of what that person should be like, what you want that person to be like. And again, if you've got a list of a car, so much more, you should have a list for the person you want to marry. Seriously. Now here, let me ask you to say this with me. Say this to your neighbor, actually. Turn to your neighbor and tell them, after the wedding, oh, you think I'm going to say something bad? Say this with me. Try it again. After the wedding, eyes shut. Eyes shut. After the wedding, eyes shut. Don't be nitpicking them afterwards. You turn on their flaws after you say I do, you're in. Eyes wide open on the front end before you see I do, eyes shut afterwards. Don't be looking for all their flaws after you get married. Be willing to have grace. Be like, you know what? I married them for who they are, and you love them the way they are. Don't try to change them. Let them change themselves, and you keep being the best that you can be. Once you've made a good choice, don't look for every flaw in your mate. Don't nitpick them about everything you want them to change. You're in this together, and it's time to find ways to work together and build the kind of lives that you want to build, that you desire. Many people get this backwards. I would say most people get it backwards. They have their eyes shut beforehand and then eyes open afterwards. The wrong order. Eyes open, eyes wide open on the front end. And that's a big part of having a successful marriage, is really looking for the right qualities before you say I do. Get it right before you say I do. Make sure you've chosen the right person. Now, moving on, Ahab and Jehoshaphat were married, or not married. They had this marriage alliance, and they married into each other's family. It doesn't tell us, Jehoshaphat was a lot younger than Ahab. It may have been that Jehoshaphat married Ahab's daughter, because Ahab, again, he was an older king by this time. Jehoshaphat was a very young king. There were 30 to 40 years difference between these two men. So it could have been that Jehoshaphat married Ahab's daughter. And in that case, it's like, okay, this is my father-in-law, and my father-in-law is asking me, will you come with us into war? Will you go with us? And then you have a choice to make. You know, when you marry into a family, it's like, okay, this is family. This is family. How close are we going to have this family? You know, are we going to be there for each other? And so at this point, the smartest thing that a child of God can do, Jehoshaphat did. He said, hey, can we inquire of the Lord about whether it's a good idea to go into this war? Can we do that? And so check out what Ahab did. Ahab was a big numbers guy. Ahab was this guy that liked drawing a crowd to show that something's going on. So what Ahab did is he goes, oh, yeah, no problem. We can inquire of the Lord. And here's what we're going to do. I've got these 400 prophets. 400 prophets. We'll bring all these 400 prophets, who are really loyal to me, by the way. We'll bring all these prophets that are really loyal to me, and let's hear what they have to say about me doing this thing, because they're really loyal to me. So he brings these prophets, and in verses 5 through 27, we see it in there. I'm not going to read all the verses, but the king told the king's prophets told him what he wanted to hear. When asked, in unison, all of these prophets, they said, when he asked the question, shall we go to battle against Ramoth Gilead, or shall I refrain? And they said, go up, for God will give it into the hand of the king, in verse 5. Go up in war. God's going to give you the victory. Go. So man, there's 400 men of God that said, do it. And then it's really interesting. Jehoshaphat, he had this check in his spirit. 400 prophets say, yes, let's do this. And Jehoshaphat goes, King, do you have any other man of God around here? Is there one more man of God? And it's fascinating that Jehoshaphat did that, because it's like, no, dude, there's 400 prophets of God right here, and they all say God is with us, and let's go do this, and we're going to win this battle. So like, God's with us, right? 400 of these men of God say, let's do this. 400. They got to be near God, right? They're like a pastor or something. They got to be really close to God. So whatever they say is right? Jehoshaphat has this check in his spirit, and he's like, you got any other men of God around here? And the king says, well, yeah, I do. There's this one other prophet. His name is Micaiah, but I don't like him because he always says bad things about me. And so then Jehoshaphat goes, well, king, don't say that. Let's hear what Micaiah has to say. Let's bring in Micaiah. So the king sends one of his servants to go summon Micaiah to come to the palace and speak to these two kings about whether they should go to war, because we want to hear from God. So Micaiah, and so this servant of the king who goes to Micaiah, check this out. He says, Micaiah, the king has brought out these 400 prophets, and in unison, all of the prophets told the king, let's do this. You should go to war, and you're going to win. In unison, all the other prophets of God said, let's do this. So Micaiah, don't be the only one who doesn't say what the king wants to hear. Micaiah, all right? So Micaiah shows up, and Micaiah shows up, and he's before the king and his throne, and there's another throne set up for the king of Judah. So they're on their twin thrones next to each other. And by the way, I got to tell you, so Ahab went down in history as one of the worst kings of Israel because he was so evil, so wicked, so mean-spirited, and led the people so far from God. He went down as one of the worst kings in all of Israel's history. He was an evil man. He once, there was a property that he wanted next to his property. He once said, I want that property. And he went to the guy and he said, hey, let me buy that property for you, or let me give you another property that's better somewhere else. And the guy said, well, this is my family property. It's a really important property to me. I really don't want it. He's like, come on, don't be like I'll give you any money that you want for this property. He's like, really? This property means more to me than money. It's my family's property, long-time family property. And then so the king had that guy killed, had him accused of false crimes, and had him sentenced to death in order to get that property. That's how evil this king was. That's pretty wicked. You know what I'm saying? Like using the law to get his way, to get his personal gain. That's wicked. And so politicians at their worst do those kinds of things, use the law to their own benefit. And that's what kind of politician Ahab was. And so this guy, when Micaiah shows up before this evil king, and again, we've got, the contrast is amazing because Jehoshaphat was one of the best kings in Israel's history, in Judah's history. And he led the people back to God. He was a faithful man. He did what was right before God. And so you have the contrast between these two. It's so stark. Micaiah shows up, and in front of the two kings, the king asks, Micaiah, in verse 14, shall we go to Ramoth Gilead for battle, or shall I refrain? And he answered, here's Micaiah's answer. King, go up in triumph, and they will be given into your hand. Can I go? King then says, Micaiah, I know you're not telling me the truth. You just gave me this half-hearted answer. It's obvious you don't want to be here, but I know you enough to know that you're not telling me the truth. Micaiah, will you tell me, really, what does the Lord say to you about whether we should go up into this battle or not? Micaiah, will you give me the truth? What do I have to do to get you to tell me the truth, Micaiah? Tell me the truth. What did God say? And so then Micaiah goes, you really want the truth? King goes, yeah, Micaiah, give me the truth. So we've got the truth here. So in verse 16, Micaiah said, I saw all of Israel scattered on the mountains as sheep that have no shepherd. And the Lord said, these have no master. Let them return home in peace. That's what the Lord told me in response to what you're asking. Should you go up into battle? If you go up into battle, all of Israel will be scattered like sheep without a shepherd, and they will not have a shepherd. You are currently their shepherd. If you go into battle, there will be no shepherd anymore. That's what the Lord told me. That's the truth. That's what I got. What do you think, King? And then, check this out. This is so cool what the king says. The king of Israel, in verse 17, answered to Jehoshaphat. And he says this. I'm quoting the scriptures exactly as it says. Did I not tell you that he would not prophesy good concerning me? Did I not tell you? He only says bad things about me. That's all he has to say is bad stuff about me. Well, dude, maybe if you aligned your life with God, the message from God would be something good for your life. Maybe, you think? You think? Maybe if you start making some decisions in your life that line up with the Word of God, what a novel thing. Like where your life is out of whack with God's Word, you start doing, like you're going to start hearing some good stuff from God. You're going to start getting some good news from God. Like that's kind of the reality here. And so this, he gets his bad word, and he says, he even calls it, look, he spoke evil about me. Well, guess what our good friend King Ahab did next? Because of Micaiah speaking the truth, one of the servants of Ahab goes up to Micaiah, and he says, and he slaps Micaiah in the face. And he said, did God tell you from what direction my slap was going to come? And then Micaiah is sent off to prison. And King Ahab says, and don't even give him as much bread and water as we give to the other prisoners. Give him half as much as the other prisoners. And then he told the guard in the prison, he said, keep this man in prison until I return in peace from after this battle. And Micaiah, as he's in chains and going off to prison, it says this is Micaiah after the king says that. Keep him until I return in peace. And Micaiah says this in verse 27. King, if you return in peace, the Lord has not spoken to me. If you return in peace, the Lord has not spoken to me. And he said, everyone, hear all you peoples. What I just said is a word from the Lord. If this king goes into battle, that king is going to die, and Israel will be without a king. And so Micaiah goes off to prison, and then it's interesting that Micaiah reluctantly brought the truth to Ahab, that Ahab would die in battle and that the country would be like sheep without a shepherd. It's interesting. It's not like Micaiah was like, oh, I can't wait to give the king this bad news I've got for him. I can't wait to prophesy against the king. I can't wait to tell the king all these negative things that God has to say about him. Isn't that how you are when you have bad news? You're like, okay, great. I'm ready to share the bad news with my family. I'm ready to share the bad news with my boss. That's you, right? Nobody likes bringing bad news. Nobody. What do you do when you've got the news that you got to give to somebody that's bad news? You're like, okay, well, and sometimes you even find ways to like skirt around it and not give the bad news to make yourself feel good, like, well, you kind of gave them the bad news because you so don't want to give people the bad news. Micaiah didn't want to give the bad news, but he eventually gave it. Well, bad news is bad news, but we need to hear bad news at times in our lives. We need to be able to receive bad news because oftentimes bad news, warnings are the things that can help turn us around to get where we need to go. Warnings can can actually be a blessing to you. Sometimes bad news may be the best news that you ever needed. How about that? And you can quote me on that. Sometimes bad news is the best news you need to receive. And so I want to encourage you guys about this, that we've got Ahab, the worst king, and Jehoshaphat, one of the best kings. And you have this tension between these two kings and this tension between truth and lies and telling you what you want to hear. There are times when, you like hearing what you want to hear, Like you want to hear what you want to hear, right? You're like, God, when you ask God, will you guide me on here? Well, there's already an answer that you want from God, right? What happens when the Lord answers you either through some kind of insight or reading a scripture or through another person? when God gives you news that you don't want to hear? What do you do with it? What do you do with that bad news that you don't want to hear? With that message from God that you don't want to hear? And bringing truth is hard no matter what you do. That's the nature of truth. That's the nature of truth. It's always easier to be, there's always going to be a majority that doesn't want the truth and wants to be like, unaware of the truth. And so, but the nature of truth is such that bringing it is what you need. And the truth is like self-preservation draws us to be people who don't bring the truth. Because you're just looking out for yourself. You like Micaiah probably had a sense, if I bring this message to the king that he's going to die, because he really wants to go in and do this battle for some reason, for whatever reason, he wants to go do this battle. And if I bring the news that he's going to die in this battle, I'm probably going to experience some negative consequences. I'm not going to be on the king's A list. I'm not going to be like, oh, Micaiah, why don't you come in and be the king's top advisor now? And Micaiah knew that there were going to be negative consequences, and he was put in prison. I have no idea if Micaiah ever got out of prison, but that king never came back from that battle. That king never came back from that battle. As we move on with this story, I want to say that the check in your spirit is important. Notice that Jehoshaphat had a check in his spirit. 400 prophets, Ahab creates this big spectacle. Think about this. I don't know, there's about 110 people in this room right now. There were 400, more than us. There were that many prophets who came and brought this message from God that the king should go into battle. They gave the message that the king wanted to hear, these 400 prophets. And that's a big spectacle that says, like, look, we follow God, and all of these men of God have something powerful to say about what we should do right here. So it's the right thing, right? And he, in his spectacle, Jehoshaphat's like, you're trying too hard. Something's off here. Can we bring in another prophet, another man of God? There was a check in his spirit. Something, that's our superpower, the check in your spirit. But the problem is many of us, we do this. I think all of us at one time or another, we take the check in your spirit, in our spirit, and we go, that's not what I want to hear, subconsciously. And we kind of put it aside, and we go with what other people are saying. And we start asking friends, like, what do you think? Like, oh, yeah, you should do it because it'll make you happy. What's that song by Sheryl Crow? If it makes you happy, it can't be that bad. If it makes you happy, it can't be that bad. It can be that bad. Even if it makes you happy, it can be that bad. It really can. I like Sheryl Crow. That's a dumb message. It's a dumb message. The check in your spirit is your superpower. Discernment. And you know what's interesting? Even this terrible king had a check in his spirit. When Micaiah said, okay, king, go up and go into battle. It's going to be yours in battle. He's like, oh no. I know that's not the message from God. He's like, no. Tell me really. What do I have to do to get you to really tell me the truth? He's like, you really want the truth? Yeah, I really want the truth. Okay. And so he had his own check in the spirit. The evil man had his own check in his spirit. And he's like, okay, I'm the evilest guy around here, but I still know that's not the message from God. And you're like, he's telling you the same thing that your 400 prophets just told you, and now you're going to call him on it? That's interesting. Like, it's almost like he didn't even see his own hypocrisy there. And so then, but that check in the spirit is something that you need to pay attention to, because it's something that God gave you. It's something that is there for you before you act on something, to listen to that little check in your spirit, what it has to say. And you know how that goes. Like, you have that check in your spirit, but it's not what you want, so you keep going with what you want. Don't listen to Sheryl Crow. And so moving on, when I have a negative word for someone else's benefit, it's the most important thing that you can say. It's the most important thing to say. It's hard to bring it, but it's important to bring it. Verses 28 through 34, it kind of talks about this, that Ahab tried to hide himself when they went into battle. So they go into battle, and Ahab has this idea. He goes, so hearing this message from Micaiah that I'm going to die in this battle, I'm going to give myself the best shot of that not happening. So no one's going to know I'm the king. I'm not the king. Nobody's going to know that I'm the king. And so what he does is he changes his clothes. He doesn't wear the kingly robes. He doesn't wear the king's armor in battle. He doesn't get on the king's horse in battle. What he does is make himself look like just any ordinary soldier in the army. But he's the king. And then guess what he says to Jehoshaphat? He goes, Jehoshaphat, here's what I want. Let's do this. We go into battle. I'm going to disguise myself so nobody knows I'm the king. And you keep all your kingly armor on. Right? That's a good idea for Jehoshaphat, right? And for some reason, Jehoshaphat goes, okay, let's do it. The young king says, like, okay, I guess he's the older king and he's wise and so I'll listen to him. And so he's shown up as like where it looks like it's like he's the main guy. And so known to either of those guys, the king on the other side who is leading this charge against them, he says, soldiers, my army, my generals, I need you guys to know this. I do not care about another man on that battlefield. I just want the king of Israel dead. That's the main thing. That's our main objective today. It's not even to defeat this army. We just want to kill the king of Israel, Ahab. That's the only thing that I want done today. I want every soldier to find that king and put all your energy toward that king and go after him. So the battle starts. Ahab's just with the other soldiers fighting the battle, and Jehoshaphat is in all of his kingly armor, and everybody can see he's the king. And so all of these soldiers put all their energy toward Jehoshaphat, and Jehoshaphat, it says in the scriptures in verses 28 through 34, it tells us, here, I'm going to read it to you. So, sorry, I'm going to start from, 31. As soon as the captains, no, that's not it. Verse 30. Now the king of Syria, starting in verse 30, the king of Syria commanded the captains of his chariots, fight with neither small or great, but only the king of Israel. So go after the king of Israel. As soon as the captains of the chariots saw Jehoshaphat, they said, that's the king of Israel. So they turned the fight against him. So all these soldiers are turning the fight against Jehoshaphat. And Jehoshaphat cried out to the Lord and said, God, save me! Help! All these soldiers are coming at me right now. And the Lord, it says, draws their attention away from Jehoshaphat, and they all realize, this isn't the king of Israel. This is another king. And so they stop fighting with him. And then they just go back into the battle. And then it says this. Just one of the ordinary soldiers in the other army, the army of Syria, one of these other soldiers, he just randomly shoots some guy, boom, and kills him. Guess who that guy he randomly shot was? It was Ahab. Just random. It says random in scriptures. He randomly shot some guy. And it went into the weakest part of his armor. Like his arrow randomly went into the weakest part of his armor. And then Ahab falls down. Nobody knows that it's the king of Israel who's dying, but he tells his other soldiers around him, he's like, take me to the edge of the battlefield and just prop me up toward the battle, and I'll die like that, facing the battle. And that's what he did. And he died. So ends the reign of the wickedest king in Israel. No matter how hard you try, you can't hide from God. And it's not like God is like hounding after you, like you know how you watch too many movies. These movies are great, right? You're like, it's not like God's a bounty hunter hunting for you. Like, Leon, I'm after you. Brian, I'm coming after you. The hound of heaven is coming for you. It's not like God is some bounty hunter. It's more like my son or daughter ran away from home, and you can't hide from God. It's more like that. You follow me? And so you can't hide from God. He sees you. He knows where you are. He's seeking you. He wants you. He wants to restore you, redeem you, heal you. And so the Lord is near. He's nearer than we ever know. The Lord was with Jehoshaphat. As soon as Jehoshaphat said, God help me, God helped him. Jehoshaphat lived and went on to live a long life and continue to live a good life and restore and redeem the nation of Judah and pointed them toward God. But he never trusted older, eviler kings again. You know, I want to say this, that parents have different ways of showing their love for their children, right? So many different parenting styles, but two contrasting styles are the parents who have their children and they want to protect them from all the bad stuff of the world. So when something bad happens to their children, the parents jump in and fix it for their children so their kids don't have to experience the negative consequences of what they've done. And those same parents, you know, because they love their kids so much and they want to protect them so much, they do everything in their power to make sure that their children don't experience the negative things that the world has to offer, because they know that in life, the world is going to beat them up no matter what. And so why should they see them beat up when they're little kids? Let them, they'll figure it out when they get into the adult world. But there's another way of doing parenting where these parents will go, no, I want my children to see how bad it is, and I want to equip them for it now. And so they let their children experience the negative consequences of their choice, and they're harsh on their children, trying to teach them what they need to learn about how bad it is in the world. Two different parenting styles, not right, wrong, not good, bad, just two different styles. And which one is right? Which one is the way God does it? Well, let me share something with you. The way God parents us, the way God looks after us, is a mixture of both of those. It's reality. It's a mixture of both of those. The Lord loves us so much that He's taken steps to protect and preserve you that you don't even know about. He sent Jesus to die on the cross to pay the price for your sins before you were ever born. You follow me? And yet, at the same time, the Lord will let you experience the negative consequences of your bad choices. And He didn't do that to you. But we always go, why is God doing this to me? No, most of the time we did it to ourselves. And God's allowing us to experience in a safe environment the negative consequences of our own choices. And so I want to say that because God wants us to take actions that make the world a better place and make decisions that change the world by bringing goodness where there is evil, by bringing courage where there is fear, and by bringing love where there is hate. That's why it's His role to prepare us to be strong and courageous, and ones that can go out in a spirit of courage, in a spirit of love, and with goodness. And so I want to draw your attention to your response form, if you'll pull that out. We believe in our church that when we hear from God's word, it's our responsibility to respond to God. And so responding to God is this kind of thing that we need to take steps to change our reality. And so we always prepare as part of our messages some next steps that you can take in response to this message. So the next steps are written in two places. One, on the sermon notes page, that's for you to keep. Look at the bottom of the sermon notes page. There are 3 next steps. And then those same next steps are written on the response form. And that's for you to turn in. And we ask you to turn that in because we want to track with you. We want to pray with you. We want to get behind you in your life with God. And so hold on to the sermon notes page for yourself and be ready to turn in the response form. And what next steps would you take? So the first one is, what are the barriers that are keeping me from hearing God? This next step is in the form of a question. What barriers are keeping me from hearing God? And I would say that there are 3 different types of things that can keep us from hearing from God. Distractions, which are time wasters, or being overly busy. Distractions can keep us from God. Clutter, like when you have a messy house, a messy office, a messy workspace, it affects your mentality and it lowers your expectations and even your ability to perform at your peak outcome. Clutter and noise. Noise keeps you from hearing from God. The voices that drag you down. What are those voices that you've allowed into your life that are dragging you down? Those voices may be in the form of someone who's a family member or a friend, quote unquote. It could be in relationships. It could be the voices you're hearing in the media, the news, from politicians. All that's that negative noise that you're allowing into your head that drags you down. Nearness to God is your breakthrough. But you've got to eliminate the barriers. And eliminating those barriers, God's not going to do it for you. You have to take the step of identifying the barriers to hearing from God and then eliminating them from your life so that you can hear from God. And then, how can I get near to God? That second one is, will I listen to God even when it's not what I want to hear? Will I listen to God even when it's not what I want to hear? And take the lesson from Ahab. You need to hear what God wants you to hear. You need to hear truth, even when it's not what you want to hear. And so when you pray, expect God to answer, but know that it may not be the answer you want. Sometimes God says, yes, it's yours. Sometimes God says, no, my son, my daughter, that is not what's best for you. And sometimes God says, yes, but not now. Sometimes God says, it can be in the future, but not now. Listen to God. Align your life to what the Lord is saying to you. And remember that supernatural power that you have, that discernment, that check in your spirit and follow it. Thirdly, the battle before me. Am I fighting it with or without God? Because check it out. Ahab heard the message. You're going to die in this battle. You're going to lose in this battle. And Ahab said, I want to do this battle. I'm committed to doing this battle. We're going to battle. So he went to battle without God. You see what I'm saying? He went to battle without God. And so in your battle, are you going with God or without God? The only way you go with God is if you listen to what God has to say. And I want to encourage you. Take some steps to follow God. And Titus, will you come forward to receive our offering right now?